we're doing the overview of all the counties, all the CRAs in the county. So we're going to start with an overview of all the CRAs, and then we're going to go into the TIF contributions for the county and the city, and then also we're going to go look into the future TIF contributions until the sunset date of the CRAs. And we're going to get proposed CRAs, extensions and expansions, and then we're going to wrap it all up with, wrap it all up. So again, there are 14 CRAs in Miami-Dade County. 4 of these CRAs are in the unincorporated areas. Those are Northwest 7th Avenue, Northwest 79th Street, West Prime, and Naranjo Lakes. The other 10 are in incorporated areas. The oldest operating CRA is Overtown, and the second oldest is Omni. These are the sunset years for the CRAs, and these are decided in interlocal agreements between the counties and the cities. The one that is going to sunset the most soonest is North Miami. These 3 CRAs have had extensions on their sunset years. We have the Miami Beach CRA, which does the most recent extension. They extended their CRA to 2044 in December of 2014. The Omni and Overtown CRA they both extended their sunset years in 2009, and this was due to the global agreement, which also included expansions of their boundaries. And lastly, South Miami extended their sunset year in 2005 to extend to 2020. This is a summary of the municipal CRAs. The numbers represents the percentage of the area of the municipality they are located in. As you can see, North Miami is the largest CRA, and it also makes up a very large amount of the entire city of North Miami. Miami has 3 CRAs, and that is only 5% of the area. When you look at the breakdown of the TIP contributions for each CRA, you see that most of them do have the 95% TIP contributions from the county and the city. However, when you look at the Miami CRAs, you see that Omni, however they get the 95% of all the TIP contributions, they actually have to give 35% of the total TIP back to the county. And starting in 2016, the Overtown CRA will have to give back 45% of their TIP to the county and to the city. And lastly, South Miami only gets 50% of their TIP from the county and the city. When you look at the boards of the CRAs, they're made up of the City Commission. However, in Opa-locka and in Miami Beach, these CRAs have county commissioner members, and this was brought on by a resolution that was passed in 2009. The unincorporated CRAs are a little bit different than the municipal CRAs. They make up the unincorporated areas of the county. It's very large. So when you look at the percentage of it, it's only 0.36 of the whole area. So these CRAs are also a very small percentage when you look at them individually compared to the unincorporated areas. The Northwest 7th Avenue Corridor CRA had an expansion in 2010. This was the northern part of the CRA. Also, when you look at the breakdown of the contributions, again, they all get 95%. One thing that is different in Miami-Dade County than in other counties is that the unincorporated areas do pay a tax rate. So they also get, like the municipal CRAs, both the county and city contribution per TIP. Lastly, from the legislative standpoint of these unincorporated CRAs, 3 of them have a citizen board, which is appointed by the county commissioners. And then in West Prime, they just have the board, the county commissioners as their board. And then I will turn it over next.
Thank you, Abby. All right. So one thing that we did is we broke down the annual
contributions by the city and county to each of the 14 CRAs to get an understanding of the fiscal impacts on the county as well as each of the municipalities. So let's begin. Here's a summary of the entire county, which shows the revenues for the fiscal year 2013. In fiscal year 13, all of the CRAs combined received a total revenue of about $67 million. And so when you look at the breakdown of where did this revenue come from, the majority is from the municipalities in which these areas reside. So about 53%. 31% of that came from the county itself. And then you see 8% hotel tax. This is completely devoted to the Miami Beach CRA or redevelopment area, and that funds the redevelopment of the convention center. When you look at their expenses of about $69 million, you'll see that we have the Omni CRA separated out at the bottom in the green, 16% of the total expenses for the county, or for all of the county CRAs combined. The reason we have that separated out is due to the reporting structure of their annual budget. So we weren't able to digest or to break up the budget in a way that fit in with the structure of the rest of the CRAs. So it's a little bit complicating. When you look at where the expenses for all of these CRAs went, it was predominantly capital projects, which is a good thing, and then followed by debt payments. About 20% of the expenses are to long-term obligations. And you see that in our policing and enforcement programs, CRAs are allowed to expend on enhanced policing efforts for an area. And so although we know that Southeast Overtown Park West has enhanced policing, it was not recorded in a way that we could include it in this 7% total. The ending fund balances is also significant. So for fiscal year 13, all of these agencies had a fund balance of $122 million. So that's a lot of money left over. And so when you look at that broken down, you can see that that 4 of those CRAs totaled about $112 million. So the 14 agencies, 4 of them had a balance of $112 million. That would be mainly Miami Beach with $66 million in carryover funds, or in end fund balance, and then Miami and Overtown with $27 million, and Omni with $19 million left over at the end of the year. Okay, so then when you break down where those contributions went to from the county specifically, you can see that the county contributed a total of $21 million in fiscal year 13, a total to the 3 Miami areas of about $5 million, and to the unincorporated areas, a total of about $670,000. You'll see that North Miami has a negative contribution. The reason for that is that North Miami, in their interlocal agreement, refunds to the county the contributions that are received for a certain portion of the area. So a negative amount of $60,000 was returned to the county in addition to what they were supposed to refund. So essentially, they over-refunded the county on their contribution to the agency. So it's a little bit complicated, but resulted in a negative number for our purposes. And you'll also see that the Omni CRA has a very low $140,000 contribution. That's because we wanted to show the true contribution by the county to this agency. So that is a result of, as Abby described in their interlocal agreement, as a result of the global agreement, they returned 35% of the total TIF received to the county. So if you combine the TIF received from the county and the city, 35% of that pot is returned to the county. So a small amount of $140,000 received. And you'll also see that that Miami Beach CRA received a hefty sum of $13 million in fiscal year 13. That's largely due to their age as an agency, but also the fact that they have a very high increase off of the base year. Opelika, Northwest 79th Street Corridor, and West Bryan CRAs did not receive any TIF in fiscal year 13, and that's because Opelika is pretty new, so they don't have much increment. And 79th Street has never received increment, and West Bryan has been below its base year since fiscal year 12, so they haven't received any increment since fiscal year 12. Okay. Then when you look at the city contributions to each of these CRAs, you'll see that it's a total, a little bit more, of $35.6 million. To the Miami CRA specifically, that's $14 million. And a total to the unincorporated areas from the unincorporated municipal service areas, that city increment that Abby was referring to, $270,000. Again, you'll see that Miami Beach receives the most at approximately $17 million. So the next thing we wanted to do is look at a somewhat cumulative picture. What's the long-term fiscal impacts of these areas? So you'll see a negative amount for the Omni CRA for a cumulative contribution from the county. So that, again, is a result of the refund that Omni provides to the county. So between the period of 1997 and 2015, the Omni CRA actually paid the county more than it received, a total of about $3 million. So that's a little bit confusing, but when you consider what's in their agreements, that's the result. So a total contribution from this period from the county to all of these areas is $300.9 million. And to the Miami CRAs alone, that's $216 million, so a large pot of it. And in the unincorporated areas, about $10 million in this contribution. Again, you'll see that that Miami Beach receives the most, about 56% of all of the contribution. All right, so the cumulative increment contributions by each of these municipalities to these CRAs is about $500 million. And so what we've done is we've broken it down by municipality that's actually contributed. And then you can see, like maybe towards the bottom, we have the CRAs in Miami split into 3 areas for a total contribution of $152 million over this period. 77.9 to the Omni CRA and $60.9 million to the Overtown CRA. In Miami Beach, they've contributed $268.8 million in this period to the Redevelopment Agency, and $13.6 million of that went to the now sunsetted or terminated, however you want to call it, South Point CRA. So the next thing that we wanted to do is look into the future. So to get these numbers, we looked at what does the county do to form its projections on what these agencies are going to receive in terms of increment. They generally use a 3.5% increment. We witnessed, based off of those projections, that there was a little bit, they were a little bit inaccurate, so a little bit, over, whatever, it was too much. So we put that about 3% just to show what could possibly be contributed to these agencies and through to their sunset years. So if you guys aren't familiar, sunset years when a CRA is terminated is as specified by its interlocal agreement. So typically 30 or 40 years. So through to completion of the redevelopment year or their sunset year, we wanted to look at what will the county be contributing to each of these agencies. So grand total for all of their through to completion or through to sunset year, we found that the county will be contributing approximately $888.5 million, to the Miami CRAs $80 million, and to the unincorporated areas $18.5 million. So we thought that this was significant because you need to know where will the county be expending these dollars. And what's also important to know is that this is money that's diverted from the general fund. So it's committed long term. So from now through to the sunset year, the last terminating in 2044, the county will be spending $888 million directly to these agencies for them to expend on their redevelopment plans. Okay. All right, and so here we have, for the cities, what will the cities, what will the cities be spending? Okay, and so...
It's what the counties will be giving to the cities.
Did I have that backwards?
No, it's the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, the numbers appear. Okay, so here are the numbers that appeared for what the county is contributing to each of the agencies. So, of course, the largest is going to Miami Beach, $763 million, followed by, what was it? I believe, Overtown, which is $35 million, and Omni, $3.8 million, and Midtown, $41 million. Okay, so here's the city. Future city TIF contributions to the CRAs 2016 through to their sunset. The total here is $1.3 billion. So that's a lot of money that cities are going to be diverting from their general funds to these areas through to their sunset years. In Miami, that's $300 million, and in the unincorporated areas, that's $8 million. Okay. All right, so the proposed CRAs that we currently know about, or we discover as a result of resolutions, we've discovered 3 CRAs that are proposed for Miami-Dade County. That would be the aptly named Orange Sports Complex, CRA, unincorporated Kendall area, it doesn't have a name yet, CRA, and the Metro Zoo Richmond Heights area. The unincorporated area is being proposed citing high levels of poverty. The Orange Sports Complex is being proposed to fund a metro mover from a government center to the location, as well as acquisition of parcels for the sports complex. And the Metro Zoo Richmond Heights is being proposed for possible funding of the, I forget specifically, redevelopment of the area for the zoo, as well as the services or the
Wild.
what is it?
Wild.
No, Miami Wild. Sorry, the amusement park. That's the one. So look out for those ones if, maybe pretentious. In Miami, North Miami CRA, it's also proposed an extension. We don't know to what year yet, but they're currently set to sunset next year. And so yeah, look out for that one too. Okay, so here's an overview of the fiscal impacts of all of Miami-Dade County. Again, the CRAs in Miami-Dade compose 5% of the total land area. The county contributions to present from 1997 are $308 million. Projecting into the future, they'll spend another $888 million on this 5% of the land area. The city has currently spent, 97 to today, $500 million and is projected to spend another $1.3 billion. And in total, that's $823 million spent 97 to today, and will be projected to spend another $2 billion. That's not including the proposed area or any changes to agreements that we may see or may not. Okay, so in conclusion, thank you very much. These are the facts. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Aniel Darkad, who will be doing a case study on the Southeast Overtown Park West CRA. Enjoy.
Thank you, Max. Again, my name is Aniel Darkad. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to present to you tonight a case study on the Southeast Overtown Park West CRA. This is part of a larger case study paper which will be made available sometime next month. So this evening I'd like to cover the history of the CRA and the history of the area, the needs that brought about the CRA itself, its creation and its operation, the redevelopment plans in particular from 1982, and the amended plans from 2004 to 2009. We'll cover efforts to alleviate some blight, and finally the future of the area. So regarding the history, in the 1890s and 1930s, Overtown was known actually as Colored Town. So when Henry Flagler was extending the FBC Railroad into Miami, he employed lots of black railroad construction workers into this area. And where they actually settled was known as Colored Town. So this was an extremely vibrant area, and we'll see that this is where black entrepreneurship really starts to take a foothold. Life in Colored Town in the 1940s to 60s was truly booming, and this area really was self-sufficient. So you'll see in the top pictures, there are plenty of black-owned businesses, theaters, and the like. On the bottom, you'll see the housing conditions. So these houses, known as shotgun houses, were owned by the white settlers who rented them out to black people who lived there. So you'll see in the center photo in particular, the houses were extremely close together, and only less than 10% of people actually owned a home in this time. And so what you end up with is this mentality that people aren't homeowners. Instead, they're living this very communal lifestyle with one another in very close quarters. So the conditions were extremely unsanitary, there was disease, poverty, and it was really apparent during this time. However, due to the Jim Crow laws at the time, Black people were expected to be in their districts after sunset. So what happened is there's this booming town that develops in Overtown. So it was actually known as Little Broadway. In particular, Avenue G, which is now known as Northwest 2nd Avenue in Overtown. So you'll see in the upper left corner, that's Cassius Clay. You can't recognize him. It's Muhammad Ali as we know him today. But he's with Arturo Gillespie, who's the owner of one of the hotels that was in Overtown at this time. You'll see performances, the opening of a radio station. In the bottom left is Nat King Cole, and he's actually staying at the Mary Elizabeth Hotel in Overtown. However, it's important to note that he was performing in Miami Beach, and at that time he wasn't allowed to stay in Miami Beach, but they sure wanted him to perform there. So you see, Overtown was an extremely booming place with entertainment. The need for the CRA started in the 60s. So downtown Miami was becoming an epicenter for trade and development. But the focus was really not in Overtown. And they didn't want the tourists coming through to have to walk through the slums of Overtown. So they were really trying to get these people out of the area. So you'll see drugs, homelessness was extremely prominent. There's also the building of I-95 and I-395 through the area that literally quadrisected it and separated the sections from one another. There were also in the 80s several civil disturbances regarding the killing of Black men by police officers that brought about looting, destruction of buildings, and it resulted in almost $200 million in property damage to the area. So this, coupled with other events, really brought about the need for a CRA and the need for a change. So the Overtown CRA is part of 3 CRAs in Miami, like Abby and Max described. As of 2014, the population is about 12,000. It's mostly Black, with 57% of its residents. The median household income is $18,149, which sets about 44.6% of the population below the poverty line. So it's important to note the way that the CRA operates. There is a CRA board which is self-appointed, and it's made up of Mr. Hardiman, Mr. Gort, Mr. Sarnoff, Mr. Carollo, and Mr. Suarez. And they've also appointed a CRA staff, which is led by Mr. Woods and Mr. Shiver. One thing to note that the CRA board is actually the board of commissioners from the city of Miami. So each one of them represent a district in the city of Miami, with Mr. Hardiman overseeing the bulk of the CRA's footprint. So you'll notice that at a lot of their meetings, the commissioners will defer some of the decisions to the commissioner that has the most say, or the largest portion of the CRA within his district. So that's important to note as we move forward. So, like we said, each CRA operates based on a redevelopment plan. The first plan was established in 1982, when the CRA was established, and it was done by the City of Miami Planning Department, as well as the current part of the plan, the #1 goal. Second, to provide better opportunities for employment for its residents, providing opportunities for Blacks to manage and own their own businesses, rehabilitate and promote home ownership, improve the delivery of human services, emphasize and reduce crime prevention, restore a sense of community, preserve historic buildings and sites, and provide better transportation infrastructure. So I'd like to reiterate a few points with you. Removing slum and blight conditions. This is the focus of all CRAs, and it was the point that they wanted to really get across. Providing opportunities for Blacks to manage and own their own businesses. So if we think back to Avenue G, and how it was such a bustling area of Black entrepreneurship, they wanted to bring this back. Improving the delivery of human services, especially from the federal and state levels.
And finally, restoring a sense of community. How do they bring historic Overtown back? I'd like everyone to read this quote. I'll read it aloud as well. Redevelopment should retain as much possible a sense of Afro-American tradition and culture, along with mixed residential and commercial development. People living in the areas today should have the opportunity to continue to reside there and share all aspects of redevelopment efforts. And this was said by the ad hoc committee from 1982 that developed the original plan. So the plan was later amended in 2004, and it was done by Dover Cole and Partners, which is a planning firm. The goals are much different: to preserve historic buildings and community heritage, expand the tax base through the use of smart growth planning principles, create infill housing, diversity in housing types, and retain affordable housing, create jobs within the community, promote and market the community, and finally, improve the quality of life for residents of the redevelopment area. I'd like to note that these are some of the renders that the firm provided. So you'll see in the first picture on the left, that's Biscayne Boulevard. We've added a light rail system. There's mixed-use development. To the right, you'll see Folklife Village and the Metro Rail Station. And most importantly, at the bottom is a resurrection of Little Broadway. So they really wanted to bring back that entrepreneurship and that sense of Black entertainment that was there before. In 2009, the plan was amended once again, but this time it was an internal plan that was done by the City of Miami Planning Department. The goals are exactly the same. However, one thing to note, and it's an internal redevelopment plan that was amended, it has one glaring modification, and that's this, the Miami World Center. They dubbed it a city within a city that would provide entertainment, hotel, retail, and restaurants to the residents and people coming from abroad. This is Macy's. So as of right now, about $90 million of TIF funds, ad valorem taxes, have been dedicated to go to Miami World Center. Miami World Center didn't ask for the funding, and yet the Southeast Overtown Park West CRA has devoted these funds in the form of a rebate. In return, the residents of Overtown will get 10,000 jobs during construction and 8,000 permanent jobs at tenants such as Macy's. However, who will hold Macy's accountable when they decide to hire and later fire Overtown residents? What are the penalties if Macy's doesn't deliver? These are things we need to think about. This is the mall at Miami World Center. Apparently, the developers were not expecting Overtown residents to shop here, as made clear in these renderings.
Now you got 12,000 people living in the district.
This is the Marriott. Residents of Overtown probably won't be sleeping here or attending a convention here. This is Overtown today. They have their historic banner, the Streetscape Project, Gibson Park. But this is Overtown, so is this, and so is this. These are things residents see every single day. So what's being done to alleviate the slum of light? As of right now, there are about 1,747 affordable housing units, individual units in Overtown. It's only about 30% of the necessary housing stock for the residents of Overtown. Job training. Hundreds have been trained locally, but little of these jobs are actually given to residents of Overtown permanently. Direct grant programs provide millions of dollars to nonprofit organizations, as well as individuals. And millions of dollars, as Abby and Max said, are being accumulated for large-scale development. They're getting rolled over year after year to pay for things like World Center. So what money is left to spend in Overtown? So let's take a look at the future. What needs to be done? Increase public involvement. So if residents of Overtown have questions, they deserve the answers and they should reach out. There needs to be an honest and open discussion of a new redevelopment plan that reconnects with what was once in the 1982 plan. The focus needs to shift to projects that address slum and blight. That was the #1 priority on the list in the 1982 plan. How did they bring that back? If projects move forward, the TIF increases, which is a great thing. But or what money is left to invest in Overtown. This is what we want to see in Overtown. It's that historic Black community. How do we re-empower the residents, and how do we bring back Little Broadway? Thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Christopher Riley, and I will be presenting tonight the case study of the North Miami CRA. Again, my research will be made available on the FAU website in the coming months.
We can't hear you from
What's important to understand,
Would you consider standing? It's okay, just use the microphone, you weren't receiving.
I apologize for that. What's important to understand about the North Miami case study is that it will set to sunset in 2016 unless it's extended. Now, my research focuses on looking at the programs and the policies that they have put in place and whether or not that's even appropriate. So I want you to understand that this is going to be a little bit different than what you've heard before. To understand the overview of what's happening tonight, we have the map of the CRA so you understand the boundary. We have the general demographics of the city of North Miami so you understand more about the city. I will speak about Biscayne Landing, a few of the capital programs that's going on in the CRA. Then I will look at the privileged futures from the inception of the CRA. And I will conclude with the future. So first, as Abby mentioned before, 58% of the city is covered by the North Miami CRA. That is a massive percentage of the city, and that is something that I'm going to come back to later today. So just remember that in the back of your mind, the vast majority of the city that's comprised there. General demographics here, we have 46% of the North Miami residents are Black, African American. We have 26% are white, 21% Hispanic or Latino, and 7% are categorized under other. What's very important to understand here is 73% of North Miami residents speak a language other than English, so there is definitely a language barrier. Let's look at some housing units. There were 22,110 housing units in 2010, and that's roughly the same as 1980. Redevelopment remains the only option for North Miami because the city is completely built out. Let's look at the historical housing units. We see from 1970 to 1980, we have an increase. But what happens after 1980 is virtually nothing. It stays the same. 55.3% of the units are located in multi-unit structures, while 36,134 was the median household income. 26.7% of North Miami residents fall below the poverty level, and these numbers were for 2009 to 2013. Let's focus on Biscayne Landing. As you can see, it's on the eastern portion of the CRA labeled there. What's very important about Biscayne Landing is that it is not a capital project of the CRA. Rather, it is a catalytic project which would serve as the economic engine that would fund much of the redevelopment in the CRA. The success of Biscayne Landing is very important to the CRAs because that's what funds a lot of what they would do. This right here is an example of 3 different site plans that were proposed over the length of history of Biscayne Landing, which I'm about to go through. It's very important to understand that much of this build-out did not occur. In 1970, the city of North Miami purchases 1,700 acres from the state to create Interterma, a trade and exhibition center, which never happened. 2 years later, the city of North Miami leases 291 acres in Musiport to develop a recreational area. From 1974 to 1980, part of the site preparation, Musiport accepted 6 million cubic yards of municipal waste to fill low-lying areas of the site. Unfortunately, because of that, in 1986, the EPA designated the property a Superfund site due to significant underground ammonia. However, by 1999, the EPA removed the state from the Superfund list. In 2002, there was a 99-year lease agreement between the Squirrel Group and the city. Squirrel then partnered with Boca Developers. In 2005, development begins on the property. A year later, in 2006, Boca Developer buys out Squirrel. In 2007, Boca Developer files for bankruptcy. Hang on, we're going to get there. In 2011, the city regained control of the property and immediately issues an RTF RFP for a new developer. In 2012, the award of the lease went to Alita Partners, a partnership between Swirlo Group and LaFrance. Recently, in 2014, Swirlo sold its partnership interest in Biscayne Landing. Purchaser Jeffrey Sofer and Pembury Associates pair up with Portugal Track to rebrand and develop Biscayne Landing. This is the partial build-up, as you see in the corner there. What's essential to understand with Biscayne Landing is that there is something called a one-for-one affordable housing agreement between Biscayne Landing and the city. What that means is one unit Biscayne Landing generates one affordable housing unit in the CRA redevelopment area. All built out, this would equate to 5,000 units in the city, which obviously is a great initiative. That's awesome. However, the two towers generated millions of dollars in TIF, and what I'm going to look at is what has the CRA accomplished with these funds. The first project I will speak about is Pioneer Gardens. Some might know this as Rex Park. Pioneer Gardens was planned and designed by North Miami Housing to create 136 affordable housing units under the one-for-one agreement. So this was actually one of the projects under the one-for-one. North Miami Housing is the affordable housing arm of Biscayne Development. This is the site plan of the 136 units. And something important to understand about the site is the site was a former municipal sewer treatment plant they acquired from the city of North Miami. During the site preparation, the underground pipe rose containing asbestos and contaminated the site. The CRA spent roughly $175,000 to clear the site, but the lack of due diligence in conducting a phase 2 environmental survey meant that it pushed the pre-construction expenditures to over $1.2 million. North Miami Housing then came to the CRA when the site was clear and said this project was no longer viable in the current economic market environment and should be abandoned. The CRA did not follow that advice and continued on with the project. North Miami Housing projected that the affordable housing units would be $270,000 for each 3-bedroom unit because of the site preparation and construction costs. In North Miami at this time, you could buy a house for $90,000. Okay. The CRA expected to sell the units at a lot, but never could subsidize a unit by $170,000 each. At the same time, the CRA executive director felt that the CRA did not have the financial capacity to complete the project. The CRA then abandoned the project after spending a little over $3.1 million. The Miami-Dade County performed an audit on the North Miami CRA, and this was their response to this project. The CRA should have performed greater due diligence before accepting Rex Park from the city or commencing development, as significant environmental issues may have been disclosed. I'll give you a minute, and then we're going to go right on to Bell House. We're not done yet. All right, Bell House was a lease purchase agreement of 45-unit affordable housing redevelopment. What's very important to understand with Bell House is that it suffered severe roof damage from Hurricane Wilma. It contained mold and was uninhabitable. However, it was still of an interest to the CRA. Now, the CRA Advisory Committee raised numerous questions as to why they were still interested in this. However, that had little impact on the CRA's decision to move forward with the project. However, the CRA Board said they favored Bell House due to its vacancy. There would be no relocation costs associated with rehabilitation, as one could imagine, because this was mold. The preliminary CRA estimates of reconstructing Bell House was less than $1 million. Many would argue that this estimate was unusually low. The owner of Bell House wanted to sell the property for $6.5 million, even though it was recently appraised for $3.25. The CRA Board did not question this transaction or look for other properties. Rather, they approved the lease purchase agreement with the terms that included $20,000 for rent and an additional $20,000 to cover the owner's debt service and insurance. So that's $40,000 a month going to something that's generating no revenue. After the agreement was approved by the CRA Board, repairs totaling roughly $270,000 were funded by the CRA. 2 years later, North Miami Housing, the same people from Pioneer Gardens, submitted the cost estimate of $2.7 million to complete the Bell House renovations. That included a 15% developer's fee of $400,000. The CRA then went to the Bellhouse owner and asked him to pay $2 million to cover the remaining balance of the work. However, the owner's attorney notified the CRA board that $1.2 million in prior Hurricane Wilma insurance claims had been litigated in favor of the owner, but the settlement award was only for $190,000. Because debt financing for the property was not possible, the agreement was mutually terminated. At this point in time, the CRA had paid over $1.3 million in this project in rent and building improvement costs before they abandoned it. Once again, the Miami-Dade County did look at this project as well, and their audit concluded it appeared that the lease purchase agreement was made to help the owner meet debt payments rather than to benefit CRA residents.
No shit, Sherlock.
Prospectively, CRA funds should only be used when there is a documented community benefit. In addition, the CRA should have obtained comprehensive cost estimates before entering into this project. One would assume that would be relevant. The North Miami CRA project and programs, I will look at the expenditures from the inception of the CRA to current, so you understand where their money has gone. The largest portion, 28% of their money, has gone into projects that were abandoned before completion. 26% go into residential streetscapes. This would be swale improvement programs, planting oak trees, that sort of thing. 23% business improvements. 19% other could be code enforcement, to update the redevelopment plans. And 4% would be community programs. So please just look at that for 1 second, because it's very important for the next slide when I talk about the future. So the future of the North Miami CRA, they have spent around $29 million to date. Now what's critical here, we have to ask questions. What has the North Miami CRA achieved during its decade-long existence? The two projects that I spoke about, the capital project, that was it. There were only 2 capital projects, the rest were supplemental smaller projects. Is a CRA that covers 58% of the city really necessary? If the CRA is to be extended, these are questions that absolutely have to ask before the CRA is extended. Should Biscayne Landing be removed from the CRA redevelopment area?
Yes.
I just said in the beginning of this presentation how good Biscayne Landing could be. Now I'm telling you it needs to be removed. There is a reason. Please read the case study. How should the interlocal agreement be changed or modified? Should there be a reduction of TIF and or eliminate county contribution? And one last comment before I conclude. Going back to Biscayne Landing, because it seems to be a hot button issue. The development agreement initially stated that the TIF generated from Biscayne Landing would not be used at Biscayne Landing. Developers wouldn't use that money for the infrastructure costs. It would be used for redevelopment and everything in the other part of the CRA. Now with the new rebranding, the new developers want the TIF for infrastructure. So this needs to seriously be looked at before the CRA is extended.
That must be related to Jeffrey Berkowitz.
I think.